Just a quick recap about the three main tenses we can use to talk about the past. We have the simple past, used very commonly in English, but not so much in French. Le passé simple, in fact, is used mainly in writing, in literature, in newspapers, but it's not a tense that we use in speaking. You would sound very old-fashioned if you were using the passé simple to talk. It's worth knowing, but maybe at a later date. The tense I've been focusing on in my previous videos is the present perfect, le passé composé. So there are, I think, about 3 videos about this tense that you might want to explore if you want to find out a little bit more about this tense. These 2 tenses, the simple past and the present perfect, are used to define actions that happened punctually in the past. They happened and they were completed in the past. So in French, for example, we have j'ai mangé, I ate, nous avons fini, we finished, elle est arrivée. These imply short, snappy actions that happened and were completed in the past. Now there is another tense, and it's called the past continuous, and this is the one we are going to focus on today. This tense is used to express actions in the past that had continuation. That's its main use, and we'll see a couple more uses later on. But let's see how it works. So let's see the uses. As I said, the first one that I've mentioned is an action that lasted in the past. For example, I was watching TV, we were walking. If you say this, then you've got the idea of duration and continuity. The second use of the imparfait is for repeated actions in the past. So things that happened regularly in the past. So if I give you examples in English, I used to play hockey. That implies that I was doing it regularly, but in the past. Or we used to run every Sunday. Every Sunday, the running happened. So it was regular, but it was also in the past. L'imparfait can also be used to describe a situation in the past, describe a situation or a state in the past. For example, it was cold. I'm describing the situation at the time, the fact that it was cold. The house was big. I'm describing the house, but I'm doing it in the past. I use the imperfect, l'imparfait. When I was young at the time was a fact. I wanted to be a doctor. That's a situation that happened in the past, but lasted probably for a certain amount of time. Forming the imperfect is not entirely straightforward, but we'll get there, and bear with me. I'll break it down for you, don't worry. But the first thing we need to do is to find the stem. Now, if you remember when you learned about the present tense, the way you formed the verbs was to find the stem. You got rid of the mark of the infinitive, and then you were left with the part of the verb that was the stem, and then you added your endings. Now, the stem for the imperfect is a bit different. So the first thing you need to do is to take the verbs in the present tense. So this is what we have. And you can see the stems of the present tense in black with the endings in red. So that's the first step to finding the stem for the imperfect. Then what we have to focus on is the new form of the present tense, just the new form. Once we have the new form of the present tense, we need to knock off the ONS at the end, because that's the sign of nous. We don't want that. We're going to get rid of it. And what we are left with is the imperfect tense stem. So for dans son The stem is dans, D-A-N-S. Finissons is finis. Vendons is vend. Once we have the stems of the imperfect, we need to add the endings of the imperfect, of the imparfait. So for je is est, for tu is est, for il, elle, on is est, for nous is ions, for vous is iez, and for il and elle in the plural is est. Sounds exactly the same as je, tu, and il. So we have our stems. Let's add the endings. So we have danser becomes je dansais, tu dansais, il dansait, elle dansait, on dansait, nous dansions, vous dansiez, il dansait, elle dansait. Finir becomes in the imperfect. Je finissais, tu finissais, il finissait, elle finissait, on finissait, nous finissions, vous finissiez, il finissait, elle finissait. And vendre becomes in the imperfect. Je vendais, tu vendais, il vendait, elle vendait, on vendait, nous vendions, vous vendiez, il vendait, elle vendait. You perhaps wonder why all that trouble? Why go through the new form of the present tense? We could just use these stems and remember them and add the endings. But there's a reason why we use the new form. What it does, it works with all verbs, including irregular ones, the ones that are irregular in the present tense. But it doesn't work with other subjects. It works every time with the new form. For example, avoir becomes nous avons, the imperfect j'avais. Pouvoir, nous pouvons, il pouvait. Lire, to read, becomes in the present tense nous lisons, and in the imperfect mes parents lisaient. Boire, to drink, in the present tense is nous buvons, therefore in the imperfect on buvait. So using the new form gives us the accurate stem every time, except for one, and of course it's that very common verb, the verb to be, être. So it goes like that: j'étais, tu étais, il était, elle était, on était, nous étions, vous étiez, ils étaient, elles étaient. Let's practice. You have the endings of the imperfect. Here are some phrases in the present tense in English, translated into French with the verb in the present tense highlighted in yellow. Your task is to translate these sentences, or to change the verbs rather, into the imperfect. So change the yellow verb, the present tense verb, into the imperfect form. You can pause the video and write down your answers, then check if you've got it correct, or you can do the activity with me as we go along. In any case, c'est parti! Numéro 1. I am 10 years old. Now be careful, when we talk about the age in French, we use the verb avoir, to have, because we say I have 10 years, not I am 10 years. In English, you use the verb to be. So we have j'ai 10 ans, the verb avoir. What we must remember is how to say we have. Nous avons. Avons. We get rid of the ONS and we put the ending of je for je, which is AIS, est. That's why we end up in imperfect with j'avais 10 ans. They are small, numéro 2. Elles sont petites, So that's the verb to be. But this one we know is the only irregular one in the imperfect tense. So, elles étaient petites. Nous buvons du café. It's already in the new form in the present tense. So what we must do is get rid of the ONS and add the correct ending for nous in the imperfect, which is IONS, ion. So we end up with nous buvions du café. Il regarde la télé, number 4. The new form is nous regardons la télé. We don't need the ONS. So we get rid of it and we put the ending for il, which is AIT. Il regardait la télé. Number 5, it's interesting. C'est intéressant. Again, we've got the verb être, which is irregular, and in imperfect, we have c'était intéressant. Number 6, you go to the cinema. Tu vas au cinéma. Now, the new form of that verb, the verb to go, is nous allons. We go. We get rid of the ONS of nous allons and we add the ending for tu, AIS. Tu allais au cinéma. The next one, I've been a bit naughty. I've added a negative to show you the word order. I don't want to leave, je ne veux pas partir. It's quite simple. We don't have to really change the word order. We only have to focus on the verb itself. So je veux is I want. We want is nous voulons. We want. We get rid of the ONS. We put the ending for je in the imperfect. Je ne voulais pas partir. Number 8, the house is big. We want to say the house was big. We're going to change EST into était. La maison était grande. Il fait beau, the weather is nice. We have the verb faire. The way we say we do from the verb faire is nous faisons. We get rid of the ONS. Il faisait beau. Now the imperfect, when you're describing the weather in the past tense, is really the tense that you will use. And the last sentence. Again, we've got this verb faire. Vous faites la cuisine, this time in its natural meaning, to do. We take it again in the new form of the present tense, so we end up with nous faisons. And of course, again, we get rid of the ONS and we end up with vous faisiez la cuisine. So which tense should you use? The imparfait or the passé composé? Let's remind ourselves, first of all, that le passé composé is used for an action that happened and was completed in the past. It was snappy. It didn't last. On the other hand, the imperfect, l'imparfait, is used for actions that lasted in the past with this idea of I was doing something, or it can be used for an action that happened regularly in the past, so I used to do something, or for descriptions of the past, descriptions of a situation in the past, or description of a setting in the past. Let's have examples in English to make it clearer. So if I take this sentence, I was watching TV when he came in. I was watching TV is going to be the imparfait because you've got this idea of duration. Then you have he came in. It was a short action, it happened and it was completed very quickly. Therefore, we're going to use the passé composé. Other example, When I was in my 20s, I used to run the marathon. So I was in my 20s, it was a fact. It's a situation that I'm describing in the past. Therefore, we use the imparfait. I used to run the marathon. Well, it happened on a regular basis. If I say I used to run the marathon, I mean that I was doing it quite regularly. I didn't only do it once. It's something I used to do. Therefore, again, we're going to use the imparfait. This time I'm taking almost the same example, but the sentence is, when I was in my 20s, I ran the marathon. So we have the same idea of describing a situation. I was in my 20s, so we are still going to use the imparfait. But this time, if I say I ran the marathon, I'm implying that I did it once. It happened and it was over. It was completed in the past. Therefore, this time I'm going to use the passé composé. Let's take an example in French. Ma sœur était malade. My sister was poorly, was ill. My sister was ill. So this is a situation that lasted in the past, something I'm describing. It was a fact. Therefore, I'm going to use the imparfait because I'm describing the situation that lasted. This time, I'm saying ma sœur a été malade. Ma sœur a été malade. The difference with the previous example is that she was ill and it didn't last. It was a short event in the past that was completed in the past. She has been ill and then it stopped in the past. Therefore, this time we're going to use the passé composé. I hope you see the nuances. Don't worry too much if you're not entirely sure. It will become natural as you are practicing. Félicitations, you've completed lesson 4. I realize that getting your head around the imperfect is not the easiest thing, so well done you for staying until the end of this video. Keep practicing. Even if there are things that are not entirely clear right now, they will become clearer as you practice. Trust me. In the meantime, all I have to say is au revoir et à bientôt for lesson number 5.